Hey everybody, welcome to podcast 20 within the Recharge podcast series. We're making a bit of a shift because in the previous 9 podcasts, we were focused on the body section of the model. Today, we're shifting into the emotion section and we're looking at the first topic in there, which is under a broad category of meaning, specifically living with purpose. Now, I'll be honest with you, listeners, this is something that over the years I have found people talking about it in a way that I just think can be so unrealistic and unhelpful because life is often so messy, it changes. So I'm really interested today to explore this with Tim, my co-author. Tim, why is it important to have purpose?
Oh gosh. Why is it important to have purpose? Because I think it fundamentally can help motivate us and keep us sort of healthy when times are challenging. So those are the sort of two practical reasons why it's important to have it. It's hard to have it, by the way, which is what I found. I feel I've had multiple purposes over the last 20 something years while I've been doing kind of so-called purpose-based work or purpose aligned work. And I feel I've sort of, I feel I've kind of I feel I struggle with it over times. At times I feel I've had a purpose and then I've lost it. And then, life changes have happened too, particularly, some dramatic ones recently have made me reassess stuff. So I think it's important to have a purpose. I think it definitely helps us from a motivational perspective. And again, I can share some details on that, which I think is important to share. Definitely helps us from a well-being perspective. And again, there's significant research on that, which I'll drop in the podcast notes about how having a purpose helps. But, we're in the territory of psychology here, right? In essence, an emotional psychology, and the research on that is at best patchy, right? It's a harder thing to really test and research people's emotions and psychology. So a lot of this is, interesting, but I think also needs to be taken with a pinch of salt.
Okay. You said it's hard, like finding a purpose, developing a purpose is hard. Why is it hard?
Because I think how purpose has been framed how I've understood purpose being framed, it's been like a single-minded purpose. Either you're driven to do one thing. Life isn't like that, right? Life is messy. I change. Life has many different lenses I need to wear, many different hats I need to wear. So what I've struggled with over time with kind of purpose-based work, certainly sort of what I've come across, is it doesn't fit nicely into a box. It kind of moves, it eddies, it flows while I flow. So I think while you can have a purpose when you're 18, if that's still the same as 28, great. But for most people, I think life changes. And I think a purpose is a bit more multi-layered than just one single-minded thing. And there's some backup for that. So let me give some data on this. So I think it's hard to find a purpose for exactly that reason, because it does change. But also, I've gone to self-determining theory, SDT, for some guidance here. Self-determining theory was made popular in the 1980s, but really took off in the sort of late 2000s. Deci and Ryan did some research. Again, I'll drop that in the podcast notes, where they found out that, and this is research that actually has been empirically tested and have been tested quite widely. So it's a model that's kind of well known and well accepted on basically our motivation, right?
Yeah.
And we need three things according to Deci and Ryan, or self-determining theory. We need autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Now, what does that mean? Autonomy, I have agency to do my own thing. I'm free to kind of be in charge of my own destiny, number one. Competence, I want to be good at doing something, right? I want to feel like I'm going to get better at doing something.
Yeah.
Thirdly, relatedness, I need to connect to others. So fundamentally, those are the three needs that they are saying, or self-determining theory is saying, that we need. So in other words, a purpose, if you're going to have a purpose that's going to be meaningful, it kind of needs to tick those three boxes. That's why it works on different levels. So that's why having a goal that's just, say, work-related, a goal that's just personal-related, doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. A purpose needs to kind of go across different areas to be effective. And I found that useful as a
Well, I found that really interesting what you just shared there, because I've been doing some work on Daniel Pink's material, which was published just before the pandemic, on what the surprising truth about what motivates us. And just to cross-reference that, he talks about the importance of mastery, which you mentioned. I want to feel really good at something. Autonomy, you reference that. This sense of, I don't want to be controlled. But interestingly, his third circle was purpose. I need to feel like I'm doing something that is meaningful and has purpose to it. It isn't just meaningless. So I love what you've brought there in terms of SDT thinking and how that informs some of the ways of thinking about purpose, recognizing its kind of messiness. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced or research has shown you about, like, how do I develop a purpose that actually achieves those purposes?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways of looking at this, and there's no real one way that works, right? But I think the Japanese have got a good insight into this, ikigai. And ikigai, the Japanese approach, is looking at fundamentally, what do you love? What are you passionate about? What can you get paid for? And what does the world need? So it looks at kind of 4 different lenses. And in the middle, you've got, what they call ikigai, which is almost, I guess you could call it kind of purpose nirvana, right? So the Japanese realize this complexity too. And again, with purpose, there's no real one way of doing this, right? And religions have known this over time too. That's why, in a way, where do you go for your reference point? For me, empirical theory. That's why I like SDT. I'm loving the Daniel Pink stuff you're citing too. I quite like the Japanese practical way of doing it as well, because it's very practical, right? Very commercial, right? What's the world going to pay you for, right? So I think there's a resonance of that, within the Western world. Now, you said, what are the problems of it? Problems are exactly that. It's multi-layered. Now, I look at those 4, say, Japanese lenses, or those 3 SDT lenses of agency, expertness, and connectivity for words I look at. And I think, gosh, where's the overlap? That's quite a complex overlap to have. So what I think the challenge is it needs to work on different levels for it to be sustainable. So I think you need to break it down. So the challenge is, I think, for purpose to work, you need to break it down. And that's why I've got some suggestions about how you do that.
Oh, now you dangled a big carrot.
Well, I mean, I think me. I mean, I think I like to make things really practical and really simple. So I think take purpose off the table, right? What I would say is have a vision or a goal that excites you, right? And if you know that those visions or goals can speak to those 3 areas, then all the better, right? So, if you've got one vision or goal, great, that speaks to all 3. But if not, have a vision when it comes to your freedom, how you want to have agency. Have a vision that comes to your expertness or your career goals. Have goals that relate to your ability to connect to others too. In other words, your social interaction. So you can have 3 goals there for a start, or 3 visions that I think can really help you. And again, I think, so you can have multiple visions should you want, or one overarching goal. So I'd make it a vision or a goal, make it something that excites you, as it makes you feel as though, I like the idea of 3 years' time, I've actually got, I've got, say, 3 new mentors in my network, or in 3 years' time, I've got that degree, or I've got that experience, or in 3 years' time, in a way, actually, I'm more financially independent, or maybe I'm able to travel a bit more. But I'm talking about goals that are practical, that you can break down in those 3 areas. I think that's a really, really good place to start. So that gets you going, but it's not enough. And that's a deliberate tease. I'll let you come in on that.
Well, I want to pick up on something you've just done, which I often see happening, which is, we were talking about purpose. You then talked about vision, and then you talked about goals. Are they all the same, or are they different?
I think the vision and the goals are basically helping you live a purpose, right? And what I'm trying to say here is, for me, there isn't one overarching purpose for me, right? I haven't got one overarching purpose. I don't know what it is, right? I know that I've actually got interest in autonomy, because this is why I like SDT. I've got interest in being an expert. I've got interest in connectivity, or connectedness. So that's why I'm thinking having 3 goals for me tends to work. If you can make it one goal, great. But, maybe with our recharge stuff, we're creating community, connecting to people. I certainly think we're getting better at it, right? And I certainly think we're becoming more independent in how we do stuff. So it's starting, working on recharges give me some sort of purpose too. But I'm trying to make it really simple for people to kind of go, well, hold on, maybe I haven't spent too much time thinking about this stuff. Maybe that's a good way of practically breaking it down, right? To start with.
I really like that. a goal and a vision drives you towards a bigger purpose. I mean, just to throw in here from my perspective, I know in schools, the places where I've been involved in, vision would a goal would be something you know how to achieve.
Yeah.
A vision almost goes beyond that, and it's like it excites you, it drives you towards a higher purpose, but often you don't know the nuts and bolts of how you're going to realize it.
Yeah. Exactly right. A vision for me is something a little bit exciting. How do I get there? That needs to be broken down and make it bold. I mean, one of my clients, he quite often says big hairy goals, which I know has been stolen from some sort of kind of methodology. I think it's Jim. Who's the guy?
Jim Collins.
That's it.
Good to great.
And again, there's a reason why that works. I mean, we're fundamentally talking to the business community here, right? And I think having big, hairy goals, people understand that. It's exciting. It's motivating. Why? Because it works. It gets us excited about stuff too, right? But as I said, that's only half the work here on purpose. The other half then is sustainable stuff. And that's where, for me, it comes to meaning. And I think you need to then find meaning in how you're going about your day to day. Because I think a goal is one thing, but it won't sustain you on your day to day. That's why finding meaning is critical when it comes to purpose.
What do you mean finding meaning?
Finding meaning is basically finding reasons outside of yourself where you feel as though you're actually adding value. So meaning is something that sustains you, that is basically you're getting outside of your everyday, what's called default mode network. I'll come on to that in a minute. So you're getting outside your default mode network and you're saying, you know what, there's something bigger at play here. It's not just about me and my own crap. It's actually about me and my contribution to other. Now, that's really, really important. Now, we've got the default mode network to help for this. Now, for those of you who haven't heard about the default mode network, again, I like it because it's been researched a lot. Again, in the podcast notes, the default mode network has basically found out that actually, when we're focused on something, when we're in flow on something, our mental activity is a certain way. When we're left to our own devices, when we're left to sort of daydream and scan and reflect, and start thinking, okay, how do I feel about this? Our default mode network gets activated, but after a while, it gets activated negatively. So we actually have an ability to be self-critical in those areas. And that means that basically, hey guys, just know that self-criticism is going to come in once you've done your activity that you feel good about. Just know that when we're just left our own devices, we have a tendency to go called negativity bias. And that's why having a day-to-day meaning strategy can keep us positive. So I'll say a little bit more about how you find meaning in a bit, but I just wanted to throw that out there on the default mode network.
Thank you. I've got something I'd like to ask you about, something you just said, because you were saying how like a vision that is exciting, and by the way, that would be one of my definitions of vision, is that actually it should be exciting and even a little bit overwhelming because you don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
However, and this is my question to you, is given that most of the world is an overwhelm, and we're also in previous podcasts have talked about the importance of setting boundaries. How do you hold this intention so that meaning and vision is good for your health and well-being, which was a statement you made in your intro, and not so overwhelming it actually depletes it?
Yeah, well, I'd say one word on that: achievability. I think to be achievable is important. I think a goal or a vision needs to be at least potential. I think if it's unachievable and it makes you feel overwhelmed, how do I get there? I'm not so sure that's healthy for our mental well-being. I think slightly scary, but potentially achievable, that frame, that gray area is good. So I think an element of achievability, in other words, realism, right? Just a little bit of that really, really helps, because I think that makes it, for me at least, less overwhelming. Because I think you're right. If you're in major overwhelm, I wouldn't even attempt to have bold goals that make you feel scary. I think I'd go elsewhere on the model here, right? If you're overwhelmed, I wouldn't do purpose work at all. I would actually focus on actually getting out of your overwhelm, right? That's what I would focus on.
Recovery work.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. Do purpose work again when you're outside. Do purpose work when you're actually in a much more balanced space, when you're feeling as though you're able to look forward with confidence. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
I think when we're overwhelmed, that's not the time to do this.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful context.
Yeah.
So if I think of my own experience, it just feels crazy. It's like the ship is sinking, and I'm thinking about my vision for a bigger ship. It's like, no, I need to stop the immediate problems.
Well, exactly. And I think go to elsewhere in the model here. You know, if you're overwhelmed, go to finding off, right? If you're
Yeah,
overwhelmed, go to boundaries, right? If you're
yeah.
overwhelmed, go to how you spend your time, your energy, because again, that will tell you, the time and energy matrix will tell you how you're living your life. If you're in the box of mastery here, then that's the right place to be it, right? If you're in the box, if you're box of kind of like just urgency, or if in the box of other people's demands, derailers, then you know what, you're going to be so overwhelmed. So don't do this when you're overwhelmed, folks. That's not what I say. Do it when actually you feel as like, you know what, yeah, I'm ready for the next wave of optimism here.
That feels really wise, Tim. So assuming I am in a place where I've got capacity to actually think about this, how do I get started?
Yeah, well, look, I've given you 3 goals in those 3 areas. So I'd say have a goal in autonomy, right? As in, you know, how you want to, how free and how much agency you want in your life, right? Have a goal in your expertise, right? Your developing expertise, and have a goal in relatedness. If you can have all 3, great, in one, fine. But I think have 3 goals. Then find meaning. Now, meaning is really important because for me, meaning is much more powerful than happiness. For me, happiness is fleeting. It's dependent on the situation that's going on. It passes. Whereas meaning endures. And meaning, as we know, and again, I'll drop the research in the podcast notes, meaning gets through tough times. Meaning really does build resilience. It gives us energy. Viktor Frankl, for those of you who've heard Viktor Frankl, very, very well-known story, went into Auschwitz with a manuscript of his book, Man's Ultimate Search for Meaning, which many, many years after Auschwitz got published. But fundamentally, he found out that people in Auschwitz who had meaning, a reason to live, lived. And out of that came the whole theory of logotherapy, as in, why am I living? What's my purpose for living? So I think meaning, what that teaches us is if you can find meaning, you're on good ground here. Now, the great thing here is you can find meaning in loads of stuff. Loads of stuff. Some people can find meaning in doing housework. Some people can find meaning in doing chores. Some people can find meaning through, you know, helping others. Meaning, though, is available to us, and it takes us out of ourselves. And most importantly, takes us out of the default mode network beautifully, right? It gets us feeling as though actually we have a sense of other, which really, really helps.
Tim, would I be right in saying that, in your opinion, that in terms of how to find meaning, if I ask myself the question, why is this thing that I'm doing important, and start to explore that, that helps me arrive at how I can turn something like housework that is potentially mundane into something very meaningful. It might be, I love to create spaces that people just can relax and flourish in. So therefore, housework, mundane, not particularly enjoyable, starts to become more meaningful.
Absolutely. Now I've got a series of questions to help with that. So, you know, and a few examples. So thank you very much. So basically, a great place to start is, what do you enjoy, right? Now you've done your enjoy strategy, your joy strategy from a previous podcast. For those of you who haven't done it, I can't remember the podcast, but the joy strategy, I think it's podcast 17, right? I know it's a popular one because at the moment it's our most downloaded one. But joy strategy. So find out what you enjoy. Then ask the following questions. Why do you enjoy it? What does it give you? What does it allow you to tap in, share, or experience? This simple inquiry uncovers the reason why you are doing it, the payoff. And it really helps you connect the why to anything in a very meaningful way. Now, that's starting with things you enjoy. You can do with anything. I did it on squash, by the way, right? So here's my answers on squash, right? Right. And I did that. So I enjoy hitting the ball, getting better, getting into flow when I'm drilling, doing a training drill with somebody. And I enjoy that experience ritual together, which makes me feel connected to other. Just hitting a squash ball, right? So again, that inquiry of, you know, what do you enjoy? Why do you enjoy it? What does it give you? What does it allow you to tap into, share, or experience? For me, is life-changing, right? I think those are really smart questions, right? Really smart questions. And I should also cite, there's a great TED talk by Adam Lebsik, who basically, he says how you can find purpose in 5 minutes, which I quite like. And again, it's kind of a version of this, which is, you know, who are we? What do we do? Who do we do it for? What are the beneficiaries need or want? what does that mean our final payoff is? So he's kind of coming along the same lines here, which is, how you find purpose through using his terminology. I would have issue with what do we do, right? Because I think what we do actually is a bit harder to access. That's why I'm saying start with what we enjoy, right? And our activity. So I would change that slightly. But his TED talk is very well received. So check that out if not. I'll pause there for now then. Get your input.
Tim, I'd love to share an example where I applied some of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And where it definitely helped my resilience and well-being, which is I was working at KPMG corporate finance. I ended up with this project where I was leading the implementation of a compliance system for us moving from one regulator called a soft regulator to another one, which was much more exacting and had quite sharp steel teeth if we got it wrong, so it could have hurt. And I'll be honest, the actual work, I didn't find that exciting. It was all about setting up systems and getting people to complete forms and demonstrate certain levels of competence. But I remember reframing it to myself in a way that turned something quite mundane into something quite meaningful, which was I was trying to get promoted at the time. And I realized one of the things I needed to demonstrate to get promoted was the ability to successfully lead large, quite complicated projects. And guess what? This compliance project was a large, complicated, if a little bit dull project. And also I had this passion to create systems that were kind of quite easy to use and weren't overly onerous and actually felt humane. And so suddenly, so I was able to almost find that meaning in something that I was actually initially finding quite dull. And it gave me a lot of motivation and a sense of satisfaction in something that could have been quite tedious. And by default, I was feeling resentful about.
Well, again, thank you for that, sharing that. I think joining the dots with this, again, going back to my initial point, which is it gives us motivation and protects us, right? And it allows us to endure some tough stuff, because what we do know about life is it comes with tough stuff the whole time. And that's why I think you need a goal vision strategy and you need a meaning strategy, right? And if you've got those two, then I think you're in good shape. That's what I'm trying to come across. And I think that will get you, you'll be living then your purpose there. I mean, by the way, I should add, I'm not religious, right? I'm a-religious. I would say I'm probably an atheist, even though I was brought up a Catholic. So I don't go for religious referencing for my purpose, my meaning. I go for kind of slightly different stuff. Now I know you're different here, right? So you've been guided by a different sort of lens here. So my default here is from people who maybe haven't got, say, a religious influence within their lives. Where do I start? Where do I start practically to help build this based on empirical research?
Brilliant. Tim, as we start to kind of come into land, are there any additional points that you want to make, or would you like to reference our listeners to where they can find out more?
I'm just going through my notes because, as you know, I spent quite a bit of time on this one.
Yes.
To get this one out and give hopefully some practical value here. No, I mean, look, I think it's always useful to at least dust down and rethink what your purpose is. I don't like the word purpose. I think for me, goal, vision, meaning gets me there, right? Yeah. That's why I've tried to break it down that way. But I think this is always positive work, right? And again, whatever you're doing to move this forward, I think is good work to do, because what we do know is people's busyness, chasing their tail is the issue. This is why we've written the book, is to help people actually get out of that space and have a greater sense of well-being. And we think if you've got a goal to get you there, that'll help get you there. But there's a lot of stuff in here. We'll put the resources into the podcast notes. Please give us some feedback over time, because this is a big area, right? But for us, we want it to be, well, certainly practical and implementable.
Tim, thank you so much. What I love with what you've done with this, you've taken a topic that I think can be difficult to access or feel so big and overwhelming, and you've made it accessible. So huge kudos to you for that. And listeners, in our next podcast, we're going to be talking about the fastest legal way that we know of to change your mood. So join us for our next podcast. Thanks, everyone.